Hey, it's Crumbs. You're lost? How do you not know where you are? It's Thorin's channel.
G2's new roster for the 2019 LEC is a massive gamble. And I don't mean it's a gamble just because it's a new roster, because they've brought in players who haven't played in their team. It's a gamble because of who G2 is, who their backing and funding is, the history of the org, and therefore where the expectation should be for them as a squad. Because this is a team which obviously, when they back had Mithy and Sven, and even just before that, when they won the LCS, they won many, at the time, EU LCS championships. They had 4 titles in a row. They made the final of MSI in 2017. This year, with this lineup that they had, that they've just changed, they made top 4 at Worlds. So this is a team where the expectations are very, very high. We know they've got the funding to get amazing players. They've just stolen the primary player that Fnatic was trying to build around. They've made mega signings over the years. Jankos to their team, Mithy and Sven to their team from our end. They've been able to do whatever they want business-wise. So the expectation, realistically, for this team should be goal 1, win the LEC. Goal 2, make it to all the international tournaments. Goal 3, actually start to make huge impact on those tournaments as they did at MSI, as they did at Worlds. Anything less than that is failure. So this lineup, with the amount of risk involved in it as we break it down, really actually is a huge gamble from G2's part, in my opinion. Because it's officially been announced that they've released Hjarnan and Wadid, their bot lane. They've had Perkz role swap from mid lane to AD carry. They've had Mickey X join as support player, formerly from Misfits. And let's just go through these moves. So what I'll do is I'll go through the very quick ones that aren't as important first to get them out of the way. So let's talk first of all, Wadid being released. It's the right move. I thought he was okay in the ULCS. He managed to do decently at Worlds. I was actually somewhat surprised. I thought he overperformed in some ways in some of those series, especially the one against RNG, obviously. That was a pretty good play from him all in all. But he was clearly too limited, massively limited by champion pool. Playing style, I don't really think actually he fit being on one of the best EALCS teams in that sense. So letting him go for a lot of different players, I think would have been the right move. Picking up Mickey X just in the context of support. Great move. I think this is a good player. I think he shows potential in terms of his raw skill level, that he could be absolutely the best support in Europe. There's times where people might argue he flirted with that title. Maybe he was at some point in time. Crucially for me, if you put him with the right AD carry, as is always the case with supports, he could be very, very good. And in this particular case, I think you want him with a strong lane dominant AD carry. I think this is a guy who's got the mechanical ability, who's got the playmaking mindset. You put him with a strong mechanical AD carry, I think he could do a lot. And that's where this move actually later on in this discussion might be a bit questionable. So Hjarnan being released is obviously the first start part of the equation before we talk about role swapping Perkz. So removing Hjarnan entirely, I've just got to say this. I always thought he was an average player for most of his career. At times, actually I'd say in EULCS at least, he was above average most of his career. But he was never, for me, an elite AD carry. I thought at Worlds, again, he's another person who overperformed, at least in the round of 8 and some of the rest of the tournament. In the semi-finals, you absolutely saw the real Hjarnan. I never bought this whole angle. Like when Sven defended him on his stream, and when people have come out to say stuff, and when even his girlfriend's been all over fucking Twitter, I've never bought this angle that he's just the fucking sleeper OP AD carry, and he's really secretly really, really good and a top player in the world, and everyone has to watch this guy, and how can you ever criticize him, and look at all the top teams he's been on. No, that was very overrated. He was an average to above average AD carry his whole career, at times above average, so at times, maybe the 3rd or 4th best AD carry, depending on the meta. I don't have a problem with that, especially in the cleanup AD carry kind of meta that we had back season 5, and at times in season, I'd say maybe season 6 a little bit. But this, for me, this move, letting him go, shows how absolutely full of shit everyone was in G2 and Hjarnan himself of believing this guy was really that good. If they really believed in G2 he was that good, they'd have just stuck with him. They'd have kept Perkz mid. They'd have said, fuck it, bring in Mickey X, that's all we need. That we've already tooled our team up from the team that already made top 4 at Worlds and maybe could have gone further with a different bracket. Instead, now we've just got an even better support player. Hjarnan, you've got a support player that you can shine with. Let's just fucking roll. Forget Fnatic, forget the the rest of them. They didn't do that, of course. They had to make this desperation move to try and take someone from Fnatic and then retain the best players in their team. So let's talk now about the Perkz role swap. Obviously, that's the majority of this video is just about that topic, right? I personally think this is a ridiculous move. I really dislike this move because what you did was you took the person who over aggregate is the best EU mid laner of the last 3 years. In fact, he was getting to the position now where in terms of accomplishment, in terms of the eye test, in terms of what he's done with good players and bad players, you had to already now start having the discussion with Perkz, in my opinion, as to is he the best EU mid laner of all time? He's at that category where you have to compare him to Froggen, Expeke, Alexic, Bjergsen. You have to really put him up there and start asking, is he at that level? He's already going to throw part of that legacy away by taking at least a split, if not an entire year off that. In fact, the way this move has been set up of getting caps suggests that actually Perkz himself is either gambling his future in G2, because if he's not good enough as an AD carry, they're going to keep Perkz as the mid, or he's gambling that he's just going to be an AD carry forever and that this is just the massive move. So I hate that from his side. I don't particularly like it, quite frankly, from this side either. Like, yes, last year, most people would say Caps took the crown from Perkz as the best mid. But first of all, Perkz was still a very good mid laner. Like, I might have made the case he was the second best mid laner in the West this year. He was also on a worse team, objectively and subjectively, than Fnatic. Fnatic have an incredible team. And this year, it was just so clear as the year went on, as players like Brox have really developed, as someone like Bwipo came in and showed us another level. And as you saw here, Hjarnan integrate himself in the team. They got the new coaching staff. You could just see that this was a very special team. Fnatic had so many threats all over the map, had so many good players all over the map, had good coaching, could play different styles. So Perkz being extremely good, but on G2, which wasn't as good and wasn't going to win the championship, doesn't make Perkz a clear-cut worse player to me. I would give the nod to Caps, especially for the AULCS parts of the season, but I thought Perkz was right there behind him. Whether or not Perkz believes it himself, I know Perkz himself tried to imply, no, Caps is so much better than me. I think, quite frankly, this year, G2's lineup wasn't that good for me. Until they got to Worlds and had a great run there, thanks to the meta, I actually thought they were somewhat of an underwhelming lineup. So, for me, it was Perkz primarily carrying this team to relevance. Wonder did as well when it was possible to play. The carries at top, Jankos was very hit and miss. The bot lane could just disappear and be invisible or be a liability, especially when they played the top teams. Perkz was the best thing about G2 and the best thing as a mid laner. So for me, you're gambling all of this new move on him being an above average AD carry. Because basically, since you're getting Caps, who's very good, that means that he could make up for what Perkz had in mid, in some senses. We'll talk about that in a second. But what you need Perkz to do now is make up for what Hjarnan did. Now, that's why I made sure to emphasize Hjarnan was at least usually above average as an AD carry. Because it's not a given, actually, that Perkz will be a better AD carry than Hjarnan. I know Perkz, as an overall esports competitor, seems more talented, seems more driven, seems more dedicated, seems like he has that special little extra quality where he doesn't just play and be very good in the game, but he is driven to want to play. He thinks about his game. He tries to figure out ways to get better. He looks at the best players and compares himself to them and sees what he's lacking. These are all great qualities, but in someone who currently plays the role they've already started to master. That's the thing about Perkz. He was getting to the level where he'd not just played the game for a long time and was playing in this meta and this opponent. He was getting to the level of mastery where you're figuring out the little nuances, the little extra small tricks you can pull against someone, or moves that you do as a veteran when you're in a playoff game and it's a game 5 and the other guy hasn't played him any. These sorts of things were what he was now putting in place to potentially be one of the best mid laners to ever play League of Legends. Instead, you're giving that up, making him go over to play in this position, and quite frankly, you look at who Hjarnan was, a competent AD carry who had a lot of experience, including Worlds experience, and had played with many different players and even different supports, and also was someone who in certain metas could be above average, could be potentially one of the better AD carries, broaching joining the elite AD carry level. Is Perkz going to be that? I'd have to go ahead right now and say I'd gamble no. Like, I'll give him a chance because of his talent level, because of his drive, because of how good the rest of the team is, and the fact that they could help him survive through the early days. And I know people are going to say, it's his off-roll though, he plays this. It's very different from playing your off-roll in competitive than it is on solo queue, especially because solo queue, I know this year Worlds doesn't really matter in this sense, but isn't a team game. It's an individual game that you try and get some semblance of teamwork together, and then beat the other team. Like, sometimes teamwork isn't even what decides the game for you, despite what people might say in solo queue. Sometimes it really is like one person gets out of control, people don't respond properly to it. So I actually don't think it's given that he's going to make it in that sense. There's been many great players in League of Legends history who had a very good off-roll who either tested it or they just didn't bother because they thought, you know what, this isn't going to fucking work actually. I can do it there, but I wouldn't want to do this full time. So the big issue for me is there's two sides to it. Luckily, you don't lose much in mid, because the main reason to do this move, clearly, because he had some god tier player in caps he could get. So you're not losing much in terms of caps, but I do think there is something notable in terms of role balance that you'll lose, but I'll get to that in a minute. Because, actually, I'll just say it now, fuck it. Because basically, Caps hasn't shown himself for me to be like the hard carry centerpiece of a team. And what I mean by that is, Caps can be the hard carry in as much as he'll pick a very strong champion. He'll try and smash the lane. He'll make risky plays. He'll try and carry the whole game. That sense he can hard carry. Where Caps has been lacking, and this was particularly shown at Worlds, was when he's in scenarios where he needs to hard carry by actually being a bit more conservative or by taking certain calculated risks, but not essentially inting, giving up an intentional death or feeding in a very risky play. Sometimes as the best player on a team, as the best mid laner, you have to know when to be a bit more conservative like that, to not take as many risks with your overall team, because they're putting a lot of gold into you. They're giving you a lot of resources. They're giving you the picks to shine in this game. And if you go ahead and blow it and die and give up advantages and give the other mid lane, especially a really good mid laner, advantages, you're actually going to mean that now your team has to have amazing players in the other lanes and elsewhere to have a chance to win. Now, Worlds, they had that and they could therefore do it. What Perkz showed me this year in G2 is even when the rest of the team's failing around him, he can play that very stable game. He can pop off when he needs to, and when his team has no chance to win, he's the only threat to, as he did in the Fauna meta, or he can play the more conservative game and just play an amazing match in the mid and do everything he can there and give his team a chance to win in the later parts of the game. I don't know if Caps long-term can do that in this team and have it built around him in the same sense. So I actually thought Perkz brought a lot more stability as your best player than Caps does overall. Caps, for me, is a way more risky player and can lose you the game just as he can also win you some games he might not have won otherwise. Now, that might not matter in this team. They've got a lot of good players around him, but you can't take that part for granted. Now, what you get in an AD carry, as I said, I believe actually that Perkz could have the dedication, the drive to stick with this for a couple of years and really put his effort into mastering and not just give up after one split. If he gives up after one split, this is objectively a terrible move, and he has potentially fucked his own personal career up as well as G2's lineup. But if he sticks with it, even so, even though for G2 as a team, he just needs to be better than Hjarnan. Although you could always argue, why not upgrade Hjarnan to a better AD carry, as we maybe will in a minute. But my question is this. What are the odds he ends up being a better AD carry than he was as a mid laner? They're very low because he was an exceptional mid laner. He was one of the top 5, top 6 mid laners to ever play League of Legends who isn't fucking Asian, basically. Like, this guy was outrageously good. So the chance he makes it to that far as AD carry, I'm going to go ahead and say it's just not going to happen. I don't think it's the case. I think it's also such a different mentality playing AD carry from playing mid lane and how you can impact the game. You can have games where you just never got through the laning phase yet you didn't have a chance to impact the game and the game essentially feels like it's lost. That's very tough mentally to deal with. As a mid, you can always feel like, right, well, it was my fault we lost some of the game, or I could have done different things here, I could have had a different pick that could have had more impact. It's going to be very different for him. So I have to say it, as talented as he is, even if he becomes a good or above average AD carry in LEC, I don't think he ever becomes as good as ADC as he was at mid. So then let's talk about adding Caps. Caps is clearly a very good player. Like, you could make a strong case he was the best Western player in all of 2018. Okay, fair enough. He has the skill set to be maybe the best Western player ever. Like, his skills are outrageously good. Even some of the risky things he does at times are genius. At times they're very stupid. And I don't know why a player as good as him and a team as good as he was in is doing those moves. That's the worrying part. So what's funny is he has the skill set to be baby Faker. Like, for real. Like, when people said like Bjergsen was NA Faker, that whole thing was actually about just Bjergsen relative to the NA players and Faker relative to Korean players. It was just an analogy between the two. It wasn't saying Bjergsen is like Faker or in any way as skilled as Faker. Caps actually has the skill set to be the Western Faker. Like, he is really that good. His problem is he has some of Western fucking porn mixed in there where he can just toss the whole game for you as well. And that can be very, very dangerous. And I wonder which of the two he'll end up being more like. Now, he had a very strong 2018, as I said. Worlds was underwhelming. I will say this. If you didn't watch the EU LCS and you heard all the hype about Caps, you saw Fnatic won everything, and then you saw them come to Worlds and you're like, right, let's see what this Caps fella's all about. You have no fucking clue. You only saw the worst of Caps at Worlds, unfortunately. It's like watching the movie version of a truly great book that could never be put on the screen. So I'll just make one up for this case. Like, imagine if they made a film version of Thomas Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow. Like, it just wouldn't work, would it? It'd be impossible to tell a movie. Like, you could make a case Watchmen is impossible to make as a movie, especially in the way that they did it. So unfortunately, if someone sees the movie of Watchmen and goes, oh, you love Watchmen, do you? I've heard it's one of your favourite comic books. Yeah, I watched it. I watched the movie. I thought it was all right. You're going to be like, no, that's not Watchmen. Like, you got to read the book to know what I'm liking, mate. It's very different. In the same sense, Caps at Worlds didn't live up to all the hype, mate. It did raise some of the issues he has with his play. Like, I have to say, what he actually had to do with them winning Worlds was a lot lower than you'd imagine, considering the hype around him as a player. Like, I think he benefited massively from how strong Fnatic was, not just in terms of individual players, but how versatile they were, with the fact they could have swapped to a Soaz, with the fact that they had carries coming up the top lane, the fact that they had the bot lane actually playing above average, but playing without as many resources and without much attention played through them. So they had everything else actually propped Caps up, for my money. Now, will he have the same strong pieces in this team and flexibility if he has issues himself as a player? The answer is no, basically, because that will get to the topic of team balance. And this is, in my opinion, a very important one. Because for me, I think what you have to talk about when you make a new lineup is not just, you look at the individual strength of the players, you look at who they were historically and who they were last split, and you look at, like, trying to figure out some interactions between, like, the support and the AD carry, or the jungler and the mid and the top. But one thing you need to do overall is do a concept called balance, which is like this. The reason why, I'll make a video on this topic one day. The reason why I consider H2K 2016 one of the best teams ever made in the West in terms of role balance is because, for example, you had a very resource-hungry AD carry, but you had a low econ top. You had a mid who doesn't have to have all the resources to him, can't. In fact, he speaks Korean and will shot call occasionally. You had a jungler who has a lot of freedom, but also has demanding players who will come to... Like, all these factors mean that each player actually fits with how he wants to play the game, how his teammate wants to play the game, and then the overall team aspect ends up very balanced to how they want to play the game entirely. Now, that team still had its flaws, but in terms of the composition of the roster, just on paper, you can tell that's a team that could be very strong and could be very, very good. The team balance here isn't that great, actually. They've done a good job of stacking very strong players, except we don't know where Perkz is going to be, so you can't look at Perkz' name and take him as a strong player right now. The big problem is, though, how do they fit together? Like, the only piece I look at this team and see there's no problem with, in theory, is Jankos, because he's a very good player. Even some of his ups and downs last year, I thought some of it was to do with, like, Fodl and then Ardent Sensor meta. I think if you put him in normal metas, Jankos will always be a very good LEC jungler, one of the top 2 or 3, one of the best in the West. Sure, he's had occasional issues in semi-finals and in big playoff scenarios, both at Worlds and domestically, but that's just who he is. He's such a talented player. You take the good with the bad, and you say overall the net positive of having him on the team is absolutely worth it. And he can do so much with his ganking ability to serve the lanes. So generally, Jankos, no problem with that move whatsoever. Wunder. Now, this is where it already starts to get a bit tough, because Wunder's not as one-dimensional as, let's think of a ridiculous example, like Khan, for example. Wunder can play tanks. Obviously, if bruisers are available, he's going to be better on those. But it's kind of like the Bwipo and Fnatic scenario. If they'd have only had Bwipo and Fnatic, which they only do at the moment, now they're in some trouble in theory if it becomes a game that's played through bot lane, if it's a game that's played through mid lane, if it's about tanks being the top lane choice and playing a very effective soak up the damage tank game and just play very conservative. Like, what's the point in having Bwipo in that scenario? Maybe he turns out to be a very good tank player. That could happen. But at the moment, he's exceptional because he gets to play carries. Since we don't know the meta for Season 9, if it's tanks, both Bwipo and Wunder will be much less impactful. They won't be as good. Like, if you have carries, then Wunder could be the best top laner in Europe, one of the best top laners in the West, could be very, very impactful, and could make up for any deficiencies Perkz has as AD carry, and make up for some of Caps' fucking around in the mid lane. That's all true. The problem is this: in a world in which Caps ends up having any issues at all, or isn't even the best player, particularly on international stage, do they have enough threats out of the other lanes? For Perkz, we can't say anything about that right now. We have no idea. If Wunder's not on carries, I have to go ahead and say the team balance doesn't really work. I don't feel like they have enough threats in terms of balancing each other's weaknesses out and therefore making a stronger overall team. So there's a real consideration I have. I also think, quite frankly, as a side topic on them having added Caps, this says a lot about Caps' belief in Fnatic. Like, I think people have really overrated Fnatic as an org because of the incredible success they've had in League of Legends and CSGO and CS 1.6. People do that classic thing where they think that, like, oh, they must have the most money because they've been so successful in the game. I don't give a fuck about that bullshit Forbes report. Fnatic is not the wealthiest EU org. They're not even actually that close from my information that I've gotten. They've had their issues of finances over the years. They've had some amazing teams in the game, and I think whatever they've done in the game in terms of getting new squads together, I don't think you can put it down to one person based on things I know, but they've either had, well, here's the thing, I would say you can't be lucky that many times. So I would say they've had a little bit of luck, everyone needs some luck, but they've also made some very good decisions. And you know what, they might bounce back and make a good squad, yeah. But the fact that they couldn't get Perkz to buy into that vision, and that whether or not G2 offered more money or not, if they couldn't buy him to buy into, like, look at the team we've got now, look at the people we've got around you, we can still offer you a lot of money, we can be the best. If they couldn't get him to buy into that, I have serious questions about them as an org. Although I will add the caveat, Perkz seems like a very young, impulsive, and a weird guy, quite frankly. So I will say, I can't put it all on the org. Some of it might be on Caps. Caps, I've been saying Perkz the whole time. It was Caps I was always talking about there. But Caps is someone where he could have obviously himself just made a massive mistake. He might not have thought this through. He might have been too impulsive. He might have thought, hey, I want to play with Perkz. Haha, imagine if we teamed up to beat everyone. Like, that kind of stupidity definitely could have been the case. But I do think it's a shame for Fnatic that they didn't manage to secure this talent. Because, let's be real, when they bring in Perkz and we talk about the balance of the team, are they going for a lane dominant player? Because if they are, Mickey X is a great support to have with you. But they're not going to have a roaming support. They're not going to play more the macro style. They're not going to try and help Caps that way by having Mickey X roam a lot. Because I don't really see Mickey X as that player. And I don't see really the point in doing that is when you've got a rookie AD carry, basically. Because Perkz is a rookie AD carry. He hasn't played AD carry at a top elite level. So I don't want to leave him on his lawn. I don't want to put him in tough scenarios where he has to make the right decision and play conservatively. This is all stuff that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Finally, what I would say in terms of the balance aspect is, where is the shot calling coming from? Who in this team is going to be great at shot call? Perkz is playing a brand new role. He's going to have his own issues figuring out his aspect. Caps isn't a shot calling voice. Wonder, again, doesn't really work. Like, I don't really know where it's going to come from here. I feel like this might be a mistake, which, by the way, this is one mistake. I can compare them to the H2K lineup of 2016. The key flaw that I didn't assess with that team was, where would the shot calling come from? Where would the decisiveness come from? I think that just like that team, where they both had very strong players, that's what's lacking in this squad, and that's why I don't really see it as too much of an upgrade over the last lineup, really, even though the last lineup could be underwhelming at times. If I'm being honest, and I think you'll never hear this from G2, the main reason to do this move is to wreck Fnatic. It's to be like, haha, you're our main rival. We've just took your best player, your franchise piece that you plan to build around and have as the face of your brand for the next decade. We've just taken that player, and he's our player now. Haha, joke's on you. Now, on that grounds alone, it's a gangster fucking move. It's actually pretty cool in some ways. Like, respect to G2 for pulling it off. Ocelot for having the vision to even think this move could happen. Perkz, whatever role he might have played, maybe he talked to Caps, I don't know. Maybe some scenario went down. Maybe they sold Caps on the vision of it. And the fact that, you know what, in Fnatic, they often treat Reckless like he's the face of the franchise, actually. You wouldn't want to come to our team. We'll make you the starting mate. We'll give you Perkz' spot. He'll be AD carry. Like, we'll do all these great things. They did seemingly the other side of the Fnatic equation. They did a very good job selling Perkz on his grounds, and whether or not it Caps, and whether or not Perkz was the one who wanted to go to AD carry, presumably he did. Obviously, that all came together beautifully to make the move happen, right? My problem is, beyond players wanting to play together, okay, could buy that. Perkz acknowledges Caps is better than him. I don't think it's as a bigger reason as he thinks it is. I don't think that's a good reason to do this move. Added to stealing Fnatic's best player, that sort of works, but Fnatic still has some amazing pieces. And even though I don't know who they're going to get for mid, it probably won't be anyone that good. I think they'll still be a very good team, and they can certainly contend with this G2 team with its flaws, even though it has some strengths. The main issue I have with this is, sure, I guess the big factor here is, if you get Caps as well, you don't want to give Perkz away, because that's kind of a stupid move, right? My problem is this. Why not just keep Perkz mid? Or if you think Caps is better, get Caps over Perkz, and then just get a better AD carry. Why not try and get Prey or get Bang? These are in fact players, by the way, who would have really suited a team that has Wandering and has amazing solo lanes. These players, they would even probably love playing with players like that, and that would be a recipe for, I think, much more success in the LEC and internationally. Instead, you've gone with this bizarre role swap, which is gambling a lot about Perkz' career and a lot about the G2 roster.
This video was kindly supported by Andreas, Snazore, Westerlund, Dean Tanglis, Gardner Wilson, Landon Thompson, Tobias Bernasconi, OllieJ, NateDOhDoubleG, Kyla Harris, Travis Greb, Daniel Yordanov, James Harding, VeXii, Robert Baxter, Lucas, Kerza, Szczesny, and a special thanks, as always, goes out to my man, Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest to feature in my upcoming content? Perhaps you want to ask me a question in my monthly AMA. Do you want teasers from my upcoming content? See who the next guests are going to be. Perhaps you'd like to take part in a discussion about esports with me. Well, any and all of the above exclusives are available for my patrons, so put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link below.